Thank you. Good reminders. It's a wonderful time to be alive, is it not? Beats the alternative. And we do live in such interesting times that can feel chaotic. Can feel like there's a lot of turmoil and upset and stuff going on in the world. And there's a part of us that loves to blame. Okay, part of me. Maybe you've evolved beyond that, but there's a part of me that loves to blame others for what's happening in the world. And when I do that, I find that I have no control over my experience of life. So this great lesson of who do I want to be in the world, and how do I create a world that works for everyone, I start with me. That's the only thing that I know, and I've tried a lot of other options, trust me on this, over the years. Tried to get other people to behave, worked on the family, worked on spousal units, worked on all kinds of things, and come back over and over to the fact that my life is a reflection of who I am. And that I experience life differently when I become different. So we've been working from this wonderful book, The Untethered Soul. Many of you are familiar with it. Michael Singer, and he just has a wonderful way of encapsulating this spiritual journey that we're on. And about how do the untethered soul is that part of us that experiences freedom. The freedom of knowing who we are and living at peace and being present in the moment, and the recognition that God is good and all is well, no matter what the circumstances. And so I was challenged from time to time, because I think what I've experienced in New Thought is, in unity or in divine science or religious science or all these things, that there can be this idea that if we're doing it right, we're only ever experiencing joy and fulfillment and happiness and prosperity. Right? And so, now, when I was young and had a dualistic point of view about God and its opposite, I had somebody to blame. God was rewarding, the devil was messing with me, and it was cool because then I knew who was at blame. But then I got all enlightened and realized that I am a co-creative being with life, and that my world is a reflection of my consciousness, and sometimes, if I'm not careful, I move into that blame mentality as opposed to just being responsible for my experience of life. And so when we are deepening in our awareness of who we are, for me, the happy, peppy people all the time life doesn't make sense. Not that there's not an ideal of joy and fulfillment, but this idea that somehow we would not experience the fullness of life when we signed up to be here on this planet seems off to me. And I know that as a young person, when I was in pain and I didn't have the emotional or spiritual tools to deal with pain, I practiced unskilled behavior. I tried to anesthetize myself to the pain that was inside of me in the hopes that it would somehow go away. Little hint for you. It doesn't. It doesn't. And so I love this idea, as Michael Singer put forth, of the pain, the price for freedom. Now, I keep, saying that someday I'm afraid the Unity SWAT team's going to swoop in and say, "What are you preaching to these people?" Right? But the truth is, pain is a gift to us. Right? Now, perhaps you don't think of it as a gift. Now, physiological pain is such a gift. It says something is wrong. Right? Imagine that you didn't have pain sensors. and you set your hand on a stove, and you left it there. Because how would you know not to? Till you smelled something. Hopefully not all the senses are gone. But, pain gives us automatic feedback to the world. It says something's wrong. Pain is not our natural state. But when we experience pain, we know something's off. And so we start to take corrective action. So in that sense, pain is a gift. I wouldn't want to go through a world that I couldn't experience pain because it would be a mess. Do damage to myself. But it also is important to pay attention to it. You see, there's a great line. It's probably attributed to the Buddha because Buddha gets attributed to all the great lines. Doubt he said it, but still, And this line that I come back to time and again is that pain is inevitable. It's just a part of life. But suffering is optional. Right? And so what did the Buddha teach us? Buddha taught us that the source of our suffering is either our resistance or our attachment. Right? We want to keep things the same even as they are changing around us. And so we experience discomfort, that we're suffering. I say it's like when we put our hand on the stove and then complain that our hand is burning. Instead of just moving our hand and learning the lesson. So pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, so there's that outer pain that's a gift to us, and then there's the inner pain. And that inner pain is the psychic pain that we have accumulated over our lifetime. It usually has its orientation in painful experiences that we experienced as young people or as we were developing, and then held on to. And the ego mind, has this wonderful thing called ego defenses, and it figures out ways to protect us. Talking to a person who still talks about her marriage that failed 50 years ago. Right? So painful. And so in that never resolving, no new opportunities for new relationship, but rather a choice was made to avoid relationship lest it cause more pain. Right? To some degree or another, we all do this. And so it's true, I believe, that an essential part of our spiritual growth is learning to deal with the pain, that inner pain that exists. And being willing in loving and supportive environments to address it and to release it. Right? It's an amazing thing because when we don't resolve something, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. You ever notice that? You have something to do and you're afraid of doing it. You're afraid to take the first step, and so you say, well, I'll do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow gets busy because we all have busy lives, and then it's, well, next week I'll do it. And then before you know it, it's like, well, it's almost the end of the year, so we'll get through the holidays, and then it's a new year, and that's when we start everything, right? By the way, how are you doing on your New Year's resolutions? Need I say more? Right? And so as we put it off and put it off, it grows bigger and bigger and bigger in our minds. And we think, oh, right? When we simply take action, it begins to dissipate. That wasn't such a big deal. So you say, well, I need to have this conversation, but I know it's uncomfortable, and what if they reject me, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and we play this whole game out inside of our mind, and then you actually have the conversation, and everybody goes, oh, good. Love you. Love you. You know, been sharing about kind of part of my coming out story is, you know, like I went through all these series of people that I talked to, and, you know, I here's what I believe. I believe that people that are not LGBTQ, X, Y, and Z should have their own coming out party at some point. you're missing out on the experience of life where you say to the world, this is who I am. Love me, don't love me, but this is who I am. I'm going to live my life accordingly. So, I don't know, we'll have a straight pride parade one of these days and let you all, dress up crazy and just have a big time so that you can have the experience of standing in front of the world and saying, this is who I am. Right? So I remember I was going through this series of conversations as I was coming out and, becoming a person in the world that was true to my identity. And then I finally got to my dad. So I prepped. You know how you prep for a conversation? You figure out all of the scenarios and how bad it can go and how awful it'll be, and you're ready. I was so ready. Finally, we're actually flying. He had a small plane. We were flying from Albuquerque to Phoenix, and he said, well, so Deb, because I told his my stepmother, his wife, first, because, I was a chicken. And he says, oh, Deb tells me you're gay. And I said, yes, I'm ready, right? Well, not what I've chosen for you, but I love you. I just want you to be happy. And I was like, that's it? I'm ready for a fight, and you're just going to be okay? I don't think so, Right? Sometimes we build up these things in our mind, and we're, and then it's like, well, that was easy enough. So in dealing with the pain, I'm not inviting us into this pity party or this thing, but we all have it to some degree, yes? We all have some inner psychic pain. And we all have a different story about it. We all can tell the story, but ultimately it's that recognition that it's always there and it's underneath the surface. So when you watch people, and I love to watch people, who've had a painful experience and they're cloaking it with their outer world, they're perhaps having the pain of not being enough, and so they cloak it in, look at all that I've achieved. Look at my resume, look at my bank account, look at the big buildings I live in, look all of the things of the outer that surely I must be okay. Right? Or we mask and clothe ourselves because that's our way of thinking. But if we choose rather to... So in avoiding the pain, we cloak it. We do all these other things. And sometimes we're not even aware. Most people aren't. Most people aren't aware that there's that psychic pain that's within them that's driving what they do. But then when we become aware of it, we realize, well, I've got an option. I can continue this path, running from, hiding, building upon it, or I can address it. I can do the inner work. Spiritual work, with psychology, whatever we need to do to begin to come to peace with that pain. And then in the resolution, we create the space for meaningful, rich experience in our life. That you don't have to drive a big, fancy car in order to be lovable. And just be lovable. You don't have to prove your worth to the world because you are worthy. From an inner kinesthetic way of being. So in our teachings, what we believe is that this divine creative intelligence expresses through us, and it co-creates with us in the sense that we create sort of a mold for which life can show up. And so if our mental modality is that life is hard, then we will create experiences in our life that will prove ourselves right. We're always proving ourselves right. You might want to stop that, right? Unless the thing that you are affirming is what you want to experience. So I always look at this, the inner work that goes along with metaphysics is to recognize that the world that I see is a reflection of who I am. And that if I want to see the world, perceive the world differently, then I must grow, I must evolve, I must release what no longer serves me and step into my godliness. And the good news is we don't have to go anywhere to find our godliness. Jesus said to us very clearly, it's neither low here or low there, but the kingdom of heaven, the spiritual consciousness, is within us. And that's when it gets rich. That's when it gets fulfilling. Because if we don't do the inner work, then we may still just be building upon an inner consciousness of pain or of unworthiness or unlovability or those sorts of things. Yay, yay, they cried enthusiastically. Now, I'm a big fan of Jean Houston. And she's got some wonderful books. If you're not familiar with Jean Houston, you need to be, because she's an amazing mind. But she speaks much about mythology, mythos, moving into the mythical mind and understanding these mythical stories as journeys for all of us. And she talks about an idea of the sacred wounding. You see, in every heroic story, there's always a wounding. Achilles' heel. And, you can go through every single hero and you'll find that there's something that she refers to as the sacred wounding. And the sacred wounding is that thing that pierces that thing that we've built around ourselves that allows the divine to shine through. In our Bible, we talk about a wonderful young man, Jacob. Remember Jacob? So Jacob, for those of you who haven't read the story, Jacob had a brother Esau. Esau was born first. Jacob was born second. Back in the day, the firstborn son got it all. Good for you, buddy. Got the first blessing. Second brother, sorry. And back in those days, blessings weren't just, oh, bless you. It was like a thing, You bless and you have a power. You've had a superpower. So Jacob tricks his brother and his dad and gets the blessing. See, Jacob lives a life of trickery. He tricks his father into giving him the blessing. He's tricky until one day he goes and he falls in love with Leah. And he gets tricked upon and gets the other sister. But back in the day, he got her, and then he went back and got Leah, because you could have two wives. Still, maybe that was... never mind. Never mind. I'm not even going to go down that path. Right? So there's karma. But there's this wonderful story then. Now he's tricked again to accumulate all this wealth and do all this thing, and he's living the dream in a way, because he's got a lot of cattle, got wives, he's got money, and he's on the run. Because he came by it in a way that was less than ethical. And so there's this point where he's out traveling, and apparently Esau's got wind of where he is, and Esau's not happy, and so we have this thing, and they're in the desert, and he sort of secures the wives and the cattle and all of that thing, and then he's in the desert, and there's this encounter with the angel. Sometimes it's written as a man, depending on the version. And it says that, I'm just going to read this because it's good. So Jacob was left alone, and an angel wrestled with him until daybreak. When the angel saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket, his sacred wounding, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, "Then let me go, for the day is breaking." But it said, "I will not let you." So the angel says, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." May have been a vampire. I don't know. It's hard to figure out all of these stories. But he's in this struggle. And he says, "I will not let you go until you bless me." And so he said, "So what is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." And this angel man person said to him, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed." And he gave him the blessing. And the story goes on. Now, this is a really rich story, because what it's saying, I mean, you can read it a lot of ways, but metaphysically, the thing that we struggle with actually becomes the blessing, and if we receive the blessing, we become anew, and in the tradition, you have a new name, and you have a new nature. And Israel stands for one who struggles with God. Now, I believe if you're on this spiritual journey, you will struggle with God. Perhaps more accurately, the struggle is more with our conception of what or who God is. You see, when I had a small God that played favorites, that I believe rewarded some and punished others, I struggled. But when I began to understand and to perceive that there is a power and a presence and a being and an infinite divine something that is expressing itself through creation and is expressing itself through me, then I only had to align myself with the truth of who I am and stop aligning myself with the stories that I was telling myself. You see, Gene Houston says that every hero has a sacred wounding, and that the wounding becomes sacred when we are willing to release our old stories and to become the vehicles through which the new story may emerge into time. Right? So we are born again. Jacob had to die to his old way of being, had to be born again, to be renamed, to express a different part of his nature so that he might go forward into his life and create a truly prosperous life. Prior to this moment, he had, by the worldly standards, a prosperous life. A couple wives, bunch of cattle, all kinds of good stuff. But in coming to peace with who he was, coming to peace with his nature, realizing who he is, he could experience life differently. So Martin Luther King spoke to us about these principles based in Christian nonviolent philosophy. And he said to us, when we know who we are, when we recognize the beloved in each other, then we can disagree, but we will disagree around ideas and concepts and not about each other. You see, our world needs a healthy dose of this right now. Too quick to label the other. Too quick to go to war. You see, Gandhi once said something very powerful. He said to us, it is just as violent to take offense as it is to give offense. I know, Gandhi. Thank you. Little slap upside the head. Thank you, Gandhi. That was right. It's just as violent to take offense as it is to give offense. You see, where does the offense take place? In me, in my interpretation. We have been exploring, and I loved what he says. I love this principle that says to us that it is not about having a community that is just blissed out. It is not about lions and lambs laying down and this whole harps playing thing. It's about having rich, dynamic community where differences are appreciated and worked through. This is why I say when we're in the spiritual community and we're working in employing and involving a new model that is mission-centric, that is small group based, I often say, church would be really easy if it weren't for all these people. It's really simple when I draw it all up on a board. But then you get people in a room and they have differences of opinions and they have ways of doing, and this is the way we've always done it, or this is the way we should do it, or this is the way my brother does it, this is, right? And we get into this thing where, well, this is supposed to be church. We're not supposed to have any conflict here. And I'm like, I know, but then we let people in. It was fine. It's very peaceful here at 5:30 in the morning when I'm on my cushion praying this up, and right? But then you get people with their opinions. So I love this idea that it's really a rich dynamic that says we solve the problem and we honor and love one another as we move forward with our lives. See, sometimes we get confused and we think if we eliminate the person, the problem will go away. Have you ever done that? Ever done that? Boy, if I get rid of this one, then I'll really be ready for a relationship that works. Right? You know what I'm talking about. This person is the source of my discomfort. Therefore, I will remove said person so that I might experience a joy-filled and wonderful life. But the universe is highly, highly creative. And it says, wow, there's really only about 4 people like that on the planet. But there's still 3 more. And somehow, I'm going to hook you up because you think it's about them. Right? And around number 4, you're thinking, something needs to change here. Maybe it's me. Right? Now, I'm not saying just stay in or toxic relationships. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying recognize that when we experience pain in our lives, it's there feeding back to us. And if it's emotional pain, then we get to learn to deal with emotions. Wow. Right? It's an amazing thing. And then when that is healed, then we create the space for our greater good to happen. See, I was chatting with a friend of mine. I have several colleagues who are kind of in this journey of coming out of the CSL organization, becoming unity ministers, and the process there. And so I was having a really lovely conversation, and we're taking sort of a beginner class, and the conversation was like, do I really believe this? Right? I mean, it's all lovely, but is there something else deeper? And I said, I more and more go back to that idea. You see, because early metaphysics is all about declaration. In unity, denial and affirmation. That ain't true, this is true. Right? Which has its place. I'm not wronging that. But I said, I just keep coming back more to this idea that we're not here to make something happen, but rather we're here to make something welcome. Right? I don't have to figure it all out. I don't have to mind map it. I don't have to visualize it. I don't have to affirm it. When I get right with the divine and trust and surrender that my greater good is always coming to me, then I just have to work on myself, creating the environment for my greater good to be revealed. Hello, right? All of those tools that we learn along the way are wonderful. And yet, it comes back to a simple relationship. My mentor, my friend, my teacher, Michael Beckwith, once said early on to me, or to us, a group of us, he said, really, as you're going into ministry, all you have to offer is yourself and your relationship with God. Make sure you take care of both. Now, I can tell you, I've always taken care of my relationship with God. But in not taking care of myself from time to time, then I didn't bring my best forth. And so I have to always come back to, am I taking care of this vessel in order to be of greatest service? Nothing selfish about it. It's about being selfful. See, when you get it right, then you naturally attract unto yourself all of the things that will support and allow you to fulfill the vision you've been given. Sometimes we sing about no more struggle, no more strife. That's what that means. It's like just being present for the divine to be expressed through us. So, I'm sorry if you're in pain, but I would invite you to see it as a gift. And stop trying to avoid it. Stop trying to run from it. The thing that I have discovered is what I run away from, I run into. The universe is clever that way. And rather deal with my own inner beings, struggling with the angel until it gives me the blessing. And then I can go forward anew, healed and whole. So I'm sorry for your pain. I don't wish pain on anyone. And yet if it is here, begin to see it as a gift for your transformation. Be empowered by your pain. Let us pray. As we simply take a moment to breathe deeply into the awareness, into the consciousness that is in this room right here and right now. As we feel that connection with the divine, as we sense and feel and know our oneness, closer than hands and feet, nearer than the breath, is this presence and this power. And is it expressing itself in and through and as us? As we remember that the one life, with all of its qualities of love and joy and harmony and peace, are who we are right now. And so we simply re-identify ourselves. We claim the inheritance. We know that wholeness exists for us right here and now, and that wholeness reveals itself as health, as well-being, as vitality. We know indeed that love is the only reality, and so we do choose love over all other options, fully and freely forgiving ourselves and others, allowing ourselves to experience divine love that passes human understanding. We allow our relationships to be healed and transformed. We remember that right here and right now we are abundant beings, for we are one with the source and the substance of all that is. And as we remember this truth, we joyfully participate in divine flow, joyously giving, graciously receiving of the divine bounty. I'm knowing right here and right now, for those requests placed in our ministry of prayer, that divine right action is taking place, bringing forth the highest good for all concerned. And I am grateful for all of the blessings that we have been those who have struggled with God and received the blessing. And so we extend that blessing to others. We bless this spiritual community, knowing it is divinely unfolding. We bless this world that we live in. We bless our brothers and sisters. We hold that high ideal that Brother King told us of the beloved community, where each and every person is recognized as a part of the whole. We sense a world at peace, a world that works for all. And as always, we bless our priests, rabbis, ministers, teachers of all faiths, for we know there are many pathways to the divine. And so we give thanks. We know that we stand in the presence of the living Christ, and we are a part of that consciousness of wholeness. That we are blessed. And so for all of these blessings, and so many more, I simply give thanks. I release this word. I know it is so. And together we say, and so it is. Amen.